of course, very important. And when I recall in the early days of conceiving the SGCI, I know Brother Eri, so I call you brother. My papa, I call you all sorts of names. But you have said so many times that theme A, when it's done, theme 2 must build on theme 1. And so theme 3 building on theme 2. Theme 4, the same thing. To me, meaning that one theme cannot do without others in order to deliver the overall goal of the project. And so the issue of vertical and horizontal learning among the CTAs becomes very key as we go for phase 2. Not only that, but also what came out also very clearly is that the CTAs were very careful. They didn't want to make assumptions that we are dealing with SGCs that have nothing, that have no processes. But for those SGCs that had processes or systems on the ground, they aimed to strengthen those processes. Those that perhaps had low or little because we're at various stages, they were developing those systems together. And we wish the same again to continue for phase 2, so that we have that kind of approach, because we still are SGCs at different levels. Important for Malawi may not be important for my fellow SGC, but they may have something which would be more relevant and important to them. So that of capacitation would still be important. So I thought that was also an important aspect. The issue of communication is also an important aspect that should sustain, okay, as a concept beyond SGCI. And that came out very, very highly indeed. And that's one of the important learning under SGCI. So, dear colleagues, I thought I could not bother you with so much small nitty-gritties, but I just isolated what I considered to be some more key overall issues. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. Really good overview, very thorough overview, so thank you very much. We're going to move into 2 sets of presentations now for the rest of the afternoon. The first one is actually a bit of a double act. On the program here, it says Chuks Daniels from University of Sussex, but he's actually going to be joined by a colleague, Rob Byrne, also from University of Sussex. Rob is going to give you an overview of the political economy studies, phase 2. And then Chuks is going to introduce what's down here as TIPSY, or TIPS, which stands for the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium. It's going to give you a bit of an introduction to that. They'll run through their presentation one after the other, and then I'll call upon Ellie to facilitate a discussion. Okay, so if I can ask Rob to come up. That would be great. Or no, it's the other way around. Chuks first, and then.
I told Rob to start. He said, no, I can start. So I'm just going to introduce Rob, and then Rob can come and do the hard work. Afternoon, everyone. So we'll be doing two presentations, but it's not just me and Rob. There's a whole team here with us. So Becky is part of the work. It's a collaboration between SPRU and ACT. So we'll bring them together, and then I stop at some point. Rob will come in and do the bulk of the discussion around here, and then I come back later to do the innovation policy part of the presentation. So this is what we're trying to do today. I have my screen here, so I don't have to look there. We have I've talked about the team already, so we'll talk a little bit about the challenges, which we all know because we're an SGCI conference, so we don't have to repeat that, but why that is important to the work we're doing. And then also we look at we call them PE1 and 2 for a reason. So the PE1, we want to acknowledge Joe Chatterway is here. PE1 was led by Joe Chatterway, so thank you very much, Joe, so for setting the standard, but also leading the work before. So we could put the political economy, the phase 1. What we're presenting today is the phase 2, which is termed as updating the political economy studies. And that's the outline there. And then we have we'll look at some factors as some of the conceptual starting points where the issues are, but also talk about the countries and the cases. Some of the considerations that have informed this work, we'll go into a little bit detail on that, on identifying the PE factors. So what did we try to do in the PE1? Some of you have seen this before, and you've heard about this already, so I won't spend much time on it, but it was to look at the political and economic factors and how that advances that affects the work which from the institutions where the majority of you come from, the Science Granting Council. So how do we update the knowledge? How do we advance the knowledge on that within the context? So some countries were selected. We'll go into details about that. We had 3 objectives, the objective 2 and 3. We didn't cover them much in this one, but the idea is to, first of all, in the PE1, develop a baseline. So have a starting point of where we should begin to look at this issue. So PE2 is to update that. It's still not the end. We'll still come up with more challenges and more work to do on the PE2, so we'll go into that a little bit. It was a short study, again, like I said, led by Joe Chatterway, so completed within innovation for transformative change or transformative innovation policy. When we use the terminology, what are we trying to say? So that, because it has connotation in different contexts. The theoretical basis here comes from a work in school by Johan and Ed Steinmüller. The idea is that innovation should not just be about technology. There's a social component involved. So in order to transform systems, societies, we need to look at also the social, but also the technical part of it. So in order to make long-term changes and to do that, this is what we should be focusing on. And so that is a short way of explaining it. So when we use it, you know what we're looking at. So how do you govern innovation policy? How do we formulate innovation policy that should be able to lead to transformation, which is the outcome we're expecting? The Agenda 2063 is a transformation agenda. CISA is also the same thing. Our CISA is also talking in the same vein. So the transformative change literature I've just explained try to look at innovation policy making under 3 frames. It categorizes them into 3 frames. Looking at the frame 1, Rob has touched a lot on this. R&D came out quite often. So the idea here being you stimulate R&D and then you get more innovation, but also applying regulations also. Then the frame 2 goes into what we've now been discussing briefly, systems of innovation approach, where you're looking at dealing with some challenges related to the system, coordination, linkages, and strengthening those can help to getting actors to work closer together will lead to that. Will lead to more innovation and obviously more development. What we've been focusing on is the frame 3. We have individual slides on this, but we won't go into them in detail. This is to summarize it, and then on the other slides, we just run through them quickly. The frame 3 approach is then looking at transformative change. As the slide shows here, it's still emerging, so it's not SPRU only working on it. There are other people across the world trying to develop the ideas around this. What does it mean? Here is to look at how to use innovation to target societal challenges. Societal challenges in terms of economic growth, but also in terms of, you can go to the next slide, but also in terms of environmental and social challenges. So the argument being that, so we know what the SDGs are already, and the idea being how do we use innovation, how do we use R&D to target the 444 in Kenya, to target inequality somewhere, or to target gender exclusion, which we mentioned a lot. How do we actually do that? There's increasing R&D. So these are the examples of policy activities that happen within the frame 1 in this theoretical framework we're using. Stimulation of R&D, like I said, increasing R&D. Intellectual property was mentioned already. Knowledge base, which is science, generating new knowledge, scientific knowledge. Improving education, STEM. We know a lot of STEM. Let's increase STEM, and engineering. Again, the idea is not to run through all of them. We'll have the slides. And then in the frame 2, these are some of the activities that happen also in frame 2. Stimulating demand, connecting, improving absorptive capacity, but fostering entrepreneurship, carrying out foresight, and those kind of work. In frame 3, there's a lot of the things these things should be happening. I won't go through all of them, but we'll look at 2 or 3 of them just to say. In frame 3, we're looking at bridging science, social science, and humanities. So we have engineers who are not very good in social science, or vice versa. But if we're going to achieve transformation the way we've defined it, they need to talk together again. Rob just mentioned the tension between basic and applied science. These kind of dichotomies will need to work. Also, including social innovation, focusing a lot more on social innovation, inclusive innovation. I know many people in the room here who work on this area as well. So these are the institutions, different ways of coordinating innovation policy. We have to look into that. We have some work we're doing on those. We'll refer to some of them as well. How do we integrate STI policies more into other policies? How do we use implicit policies more in achieving the goals of innovation policy? Reviewing the way we work with policy mixes, what instruments we're using to target, because what we see so far is some of our instruments can actually be reinforcing inequality, reinforcing some of the problems we're trying to deal with. So again, we'll have this slide. So what are the principles guiding what we do in this approach? These principles apply to the case studies we looked at in the 3 countries. That's why I'm going through them a little bit. You look at the issue of directionality, which is are solutions being looked just from the technological perspective. For example, are we considering other options? Or which options were considered? Is technology just assumed? Okay, should be fine. It's okay, so technology assumed. Okay, again, we won't go through the 6. We have them, and we have materials to share on those as well. I've talked about inclusion. I've talked about socio-technical, the importance of addressing both the social and technical infrastructure that govern what we want to deal with. So those are the criteria. And now we're going to the actual work we did. Involved Ghana. Some of the Ghana team are here. I also see the colleague leading the Senegal team is here as well. We had a literature review, but then we also used the...
Later, I'm sure Sylvans from Esteco will be very much interested to join that debate because of the attempt to align the ESC agenda with the Esteco and going all the way to STISA. So I'm sure you can probably seek each other out and continue the debate. Thank you. So I think, thank you very much for those questions. I guess my task is over, and I hand back to Becky this time.
So thank you, Rob, Chucks, and Ellie. We move on to the final session of the day before I think Ellie is closing for us. So if I can ask Julius to come up, Julius Gwagwa. He is going to give a brief overview of some case studies that are being developed, of some of the learning from phase 1. So Julius, I think you're at the beginning of your work, so not sure how many findings you've got so far, but do you have slides? Yes? Okay. I think Ruth has them.
Ruth, do you have our slides? Okay. To use the row, if you are set up already there. Oh, yeah. Clockwise with your leg. The leg must continue going clockwise, and you are writing the 6. What's happening? No. Okay, Millie, tell us what happened.
Difficult. You cannot.
What happened?
As soon as I started writing, the legs started going.
Going the other way. Okay. So directionality matters. In a multi-component system with many moving parts, directionality matters. I think that's our presentation, right, Tim? Do we need to say anything else? Okay. Anyway, we prepared some slides, so we are going to make a presentation. And I think I want to appreciate the organizers of this day and maybe the whole forum, especially our talk, given the way things have happened, because we've had the talk about what's happening on the ground. We have had the conversations in the World Cafe in the morning, the verbal confirmations on what is happening on the ground. We have seen some documentary evidence, we saw the videos of what's happening on the ground. And our project is basically going to go onto the ground and confirm that, or find evidence to actually confirm that. It's good to talk about what's happening. It's good to read about what's happening. It's good to see videos on what's happening. But we want to just go onto the ground and really find some of the bigger stories behind whatever is happening on the ground. So that's what our project is going to do. And before I hand over to my colleague, Carla, who is going to introduce the project team and also talk about the project, let me just say, John Kirkland gave a very interesting food for thought, or a point for us to reflect on just before we went for lunch. He talked about going back to basics. And for me, that's really quite a key issue. When you think about science systems, and you ask, what is their reason for being? What is the reason for existence for a science system? Just really stepping back. It's about contributing to societal objectives. There are people that are hungry out there that need to be fed. There are water and sanitation issues out there. There are environmental concerns out there. So if a science system is not relevant to those agendas, I think the issue of relevance is really cutting through right from the start. Even in the presentation we just had, the issue of relevance came through. So our study is actually going to look at the issue of relevance from so many different angles. The whole issue about effectiveness. If something is effective, it means it's doing the right things. It's doing the relevant things, and that's a key agenda for science systems. But let me stop at this point and invite my colleague Carla, who is going to introduce the project team and also talk about the project that we are doing. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Julius. Thank you. Thank you for giving us the time to talk about this project. As we've already said, it's very early days, so we're talking much more about the concept and what the project will be rather than what the project is at this point. So this is the name of the project, SGCI Training Effectiveness Case Studies Project, or STECS, which I'll refer to it throughout as. So when you see that abbreviation throughout the slides, apologies, we have a very delicate HDMI cable, so I think we're just having some issues with the visuals here. So the project is very new. We had the inception meeting only at the very end of September, so we've only really just pinned down exactly what we're going to be doing. We are... Oh, sure, thank you. So I can see the slides, so I do have an advantage over you, unfortunately, because you cannot see them. So, one thing We're good. We have visuals again. Okay, excellent. So we're a research team which are, to all intents and purposes, independent from SGCI. We're not part of it. We're based at University College London and the University of Rwanda. If we skip on, so there we go. So that's the project team. So Julius has already spoken to you just now. I'm Carla, and you can see my colleagues just here, Anne-Marie and Remy. We also have an academic and policy advice team. So as Julius has already said, the whole point of this project is to look at effectiveness. And in looking at effectiveness, we want to make sure that we have good oversight of what we're going to be looking at. So we have chosen a number of people from across our institutions who we know are very well placed to advise us on this. So the premise of the STECS project is to essentially run alongside, so everybody who was in the morning session, and methodology in a sort of chronological sense. So we have the research question at the beginning there, we have the sub-questions in the second column, But then we've tried to speculate about the kind of data that we would need to start digging into these questions and how we might get that. So that we will be using mixed methods. We will be looking at qualitative and quantitative data. We will be doing document reviews. So the slide that I'll present in a moment, actually, Anne-Marie and Remy have been doing some preliminary work to understand the cases that we would be looking at. So we'll be doing documentary work, but also trying to do on-site discussions, interviews, key informant interviews, and doing small questionnaires, as I say, to really dig into this. The data analysis will be largely thematic to try, as I say, to develop these stories and really understand the situation that's going on within particular SGCs, to filter those findings into recommendations for the SGC, so reflecting on yourselves, but feeding into SGCI as well in order to improve their practice. The conceptual framework here, I'm not going to labor on because we are very familiar with this and we have seen certainly the focus areas and the indicators throughout the day today. So this is just to say that, again, we're drawing very much on the existing frameworks that SGCI is using and trying to draw the sort of key points and sub-points of our understanding and engagement from this. One of the ways that we've triaged this work, and actually similarly to the previous presentation, unfortunately we don't have the time and resource to be able to do very, very detailed case studies across every single one of the SGCs that are part of SGCI. We will use a case study methodology. So as with any good case study methodology, we've tried to do this in a way that makes the cases that we've chosen representative and that they're usefully illustrative of various kind of dimensions of variability within the system, which, as always, this is just sort of general case design, trying to think about whether we're picking a range of typical cases, very diverse cases, very unusual or influential cases within that case study selection. So my colleagues are happy to speak further in detail about this after the presentation, but I'll just give the very brief overview of that here. So we built a selection matrix for case studies in the mindfulness of trying to have this representative sample across, which again drew upon these themes and posed particular questions of evidence that we could find openly accessible through SGCI and through the SGCs themselves. As I say, my colleagues can speak in more detail about the process. They were the ones that undertook this preliminary analysis. So the primary cases that we've chosen up here, you can see a little bit of information which I'm not going to go through. I don't know exactly how much time we have. Is there time? Okay, that's not so bad. Okay, I will walk through these a little bit then. So you can see the idea is that we've chosen cases that have a variability in terms of the training engagement, in terms of evidence at which that training engagement has been taken into making particular actions or activities within the SGC, and similarly with learning outcomes. So we've mapped those out to some extent and tried to come up with this varied case matrix that gives us an overview of some of the SGCs. So just to say, this is not, we've called them primary cases and secondary cases. The idea is not that we've picked particularly excellent or particularly poor. It's not supposed to be a marker of excellence. It's simply trying to get this mix of different cases so that we can understand the situation that's going on. So I just wanted to, I realize the language there can be problematic. So these are the primary cases that we've chosen. We've not started on the ground research yet. This is the point that we have gotten to. The secondary cases are on the following slide, and you can see have been mapped out in a similar way. So proposed outputs and outcomes. So I know that this is sort of jumping the gun a little bit because we haven't actually done the research yet. So the idea is that obviously we will address and have started to address our case study or primary case SGCs to start engaging in this more detailed conversation in the space that we've set out in our research question. We've put outputs and outcomes here because we realize that actually it is useful to think about what sorts of things these might be as early on in the process as possible, because otherwise we're simply asking people to engage with something that doesn't have an obvious endpoint or an obvious benefit or an obvious outcome. So some of these are very much written into the nature of the project itself. So we will be producing academic articles as part of this. But we do also hope to produce useful project reports and policy briefs that go alongside this, that genuinely do try to tell these stories and dig into the experiences of the SGCs. One of the things that we really do hope that this will lead to, and that actually will be a helpful progression from this for both the SGCs and SGCI, is, and this is a kind of speculative representation, but an understanding of the system or network that actually operates around each SGC. This coming out in the discussions, the conversations that we have, and us as a team actually being able to map this out a little bit and have an appreciation of the broader impact that the networks around the SGCs and the network that SGCI sits around actually look like. So our next steps, we're going to get started, basically, is our main next step. So we've talked about what we're going to do, but we need to do some of it. So the process of getting appropriate research permits, obviously an ethical approval is ongoing and almost completed from UCL. And we will start primary data collection as soon as that is in place. And of course, analysis, interpretation, and reporting comes after that. I apologize because we had a little bit of a struggle at the beginning of the session to get the tech all set up. So there is a small interactive piece. I realize it's late in the day, but we just wanted to have something slightly more lighthearted at the end of the session. So we have only 4 questions to ask you. And we've got a slightly different platform, so we're not using Slido. I don't know if this is an innovation. We're using menti.com. It works in a very similar way to Slido, so everybody who's engaged with Slido all day, and actually throughout the week, it's a very much similar platform. So all you need to do is on your laptop or on your phone or whichever device you wish to use, go to menti.com, and you put in, disappeared. You put in the code. Sorry, it was the, yeah. Sorry, I did not memorize the code. I should have done. So you put in this code, and this code will bring up the 4 questions. So I'll just give you a moment to get into the platform. So what you should actually see when you log in is you'll see a general question page. So actually, if you have general questions, you can ask general questions there, but there will be 4 specific questions that we'll put up. But I'll just give it a moment.
Are we there yet? Are you using 2G or 4G? Are you there? Yeah. So the code is 501079.
So we'll leave the question spot up, and actually we'll put this one up afterwards, so it will go back to this. So if you have any other thoughts or comments or questions, as you can see, they all just pop up here. So you're very welcome to keep questioning and commenting. But if I can ask, if we just progress one slide, you should see, on Menti. I've made this unnecessarily complicated. I've got the roving mic, so I'm going to rove. Oh, that's weird. I think you can just do it, and it should just... Okay, so I'm going to introduce the first question, which is I say an easy question, but I think this is probably a deceptively complicated question. And we just wanted to know who was in the room. We appreciate that it's a session around SGC, so a lot of you are probably connected in some way. But actually, we're interested to know what you would consider your role to be You can choose multiple answers within this, actually, so you don't have to pick one. You can choose several roles. So if you're an academic, but you're also part of a development agency, you get the idea. You can pick multiple ones. So we should be able to see you all flying in as you make your selections. So we'll just give you about a minute to do this one. So we can see a few flying in. Okay, so we'll just give people a few more seconds. I'm very curious, not to call you out, and obviously we don't know who you are, but which categories have we missed? Who are the others? What have we forgotten? National research agencies. Okay, thank you. Any other others? Because it's useful to know. Okay, we've probably had fun playing with that one, so we can wait for the blue screen to disappear, and we'll move on to the next question. More difficult one. So, thinking across the 4 SGCI thematic areas, and you can only choose one this time, unfortunately.
Primary cases of 8 countries, meaning Mozambique, Namibia, Malawi, Burkina Faso, Uganda, Rwanda, Zambia, and Kenya. If they could kindly maybe stay for a minute at the end of the session for us to discuss just for 1 minute or 2 on the best way forward. Thank you.
Okay, I will now hand to Ellie to make some closing remarks, and then I have a few housekeeping issues.
2 comments as part of my closing remarks. One is a comment and the other one is a request and an apology, actually. So the one point I wanted to make is that if you listened carefully, and I said this day is actually the most important day for the SGCI. It is the opportunity we have to be able to learn and interact with each other. So it is by far the most important one. I'm not saying that the others are less important. I'm just saying that in terms of importance, this day is always been the most important one. And I started by saying in the morning how it is about how the SGCI is trying to make a difference. So it is that important. But the point I wanted to make is that if the SGCI has not been very successful, if at least we think that it has been able to provide a space for us as councils to air our opinions. You see, sometimes we have opinions, but we don't have the space. And I think that is the value that we see. So forget about everything else if you don't think it is that critical. But at least that one opportunity for us as councils to be able to have a platform where we can exchange, where we can learn, where we can share. So for us, and I'm sure for everybody in the room, I think that is the most critical value of the SGCI. I think the SGCI has also tried to strengthen our voices as councils, all right? And I'm using us because IDRC is basically just like the SGCs. And all the other funding agencies are just like, we are all the same. We are members of the same family. So the voices is an opportunity for us to strengthen the voices of the council so that they can be heard. And I'm sure you may have realized that when we started, some of us were not speaking as much, but I can sense that some degree of boldness which has come over time. And I think this is good. I mean, everybody is now comfortable to speak and to be heard. And I think the SGCI gives us an opportunity, just like judges in court always say that everybody has a right to be heard. So if we think about the SGCI as giving us that opportunity to be heard so that we can make our case. It does not mean that our case will always win, but we can make our case nevertheless. So that is a very important value addition. The other thing, the second point is, and this point has been articulated by several councils, in particular Dr. Zangare from Cote d'Ivoire. He's always said that before the SGCI, his country was not able to work with other countries in Africa, particularly in the English-speaking parts of the continent. I mean, I hate to think in terms of language, but anyway, that is the reality. So he has made this point several times, and I think some of you have also made the same point, that through the SGCI, and you heard about the MOUs that we established, those MOUs are not only for SGCI activities. Those MOUs will be there long after the SGCI closes. So that opportunity for us as councils in different countries to be able to work with each other, that to me is a very important value addition in terms of the work of the SGCI. Only those 2 points I wanted to make, and I think those points came out in the discussions that we had. The last point is more of a request and also an apology. You know, if I was to be self-critical, I would say that maybe the agenda was too packed. And I think as lesson to us, to all of us, I think going forward we will be able to think about how to make the day maybe a little lighter so as to allow for more opportunity for reflection. So that's trying to be kind of self-critical and trying to think, what should we learn, what have we learned? I think that somebody actually mentioned to me, but I also felt that maybe there were too many activities that we had packed into the day. Now, the second point is that there is the general feeling that we tend to request too much information too often and sometimes over and over again from the same councils. I think this just shows how important the councils are, right? Because if everybody is trying to talk to you about information, it means that you are really important. And there's nowhere else they can get this information. So please, let us cooperate and provide that information. The team that's conducting case studies, they may be asking you some questions that the political economy team is also asking, but maybe the angle is slightly different. So see it as an opportunity, as an enriching opportunity to be able to interact with them. Okay, so don't see it as a bother, because you are the most critical components of the SGCI. So I just wanted to urge you to have that understanding. So that is all I have to say, but I cannot forget to thank everybody who participated in this session. We experimented this year with the approaches that were not used before. You heard about the fishbowl, the World Cafe. Maybe we can call it Africa Cafe, right? So because, okay. All right, so we can change that. But we were experimenting with a different approach rather than some people talking and others listening. We experimented with this system of people going around, and we will be looking to hearing from you whether you think that is a good system that we can use in future, or whether you have other suggestions. I liked Slido. Actually, I've never heard of Slido before, and now we've just had another one called Menti. So, as a science technology council, I think we're not doing too badly, right? Anyway, so I just want to thank you most sincerely, particularly the people who led the various sections. I don't have to mention you by name, but I just want to thank you. And may I request that we give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellie, and thank you to all the presenters from me. We're very close to finishing. I have one general announcement and some more specific and logistics announcements. So the first announcement is that Theme 3 will be having its final closeout workshop in Senegal. Thank you to Suke and her team for hosting us in February, first week of February, second week of February, week of the 10th of February. We will be sending out invitations to you all very shortly. We would like to use this opportunity to delve further into the learning and the key findings and lessons we have been receiving from Theme 3, but also from the other thematic areas. It all feeds into the book that some of us in Theme 3 have been talking about today, which will also be launched at that event. So you'll get more information on that, but please save the date, the week of the 10th. It'll be for 2.5 days, probably middle of the week in February in Senegal. So that's the general announcement. Specific announcements with regards to logistics. We now have a break, very short break. The SGCs, you are needed back in here within the next 10 minutes for a final session of the day. We then have the dinner this evening. We are being hosted at the National Museum of Tanzania. It's just down the road. But we will take a bus to that dinner. The bus will leave at 6. If you are staying at the other hotel, you need to be here for the bus. The bus, why can't it go past and pick them up on the way? Because of the? Oh, because of the, okay. So if you are staying at the other hotel, you can either go back to the other hotel and then come back here for 6 o'clock, or you can stay here and hang around until 6 o'clock. But the bus will leave here at 6, and we will be escorted to the National Museum for dinner this evening, and then buses will bring us back. There is the opportunity, if you would like, to do some visiting around after the meetings. So apparently there are forms at the reception desk, at the registration desk, that you can fill in if you are interested in either going to Zanzibar, to Mikumi National Park, which is just outside of Dar es Salaam. Zanzibar is across a ferry ride away. You can have a Dar es Salaam city tour, or you can go to Bagamoyo, a very nice village, near a town now, further up the coast. So if you are interested in any of those, please talk to the ladies at the registration desk. If you are needing an airport transfer and you haven't spoken to anybody about that, please also talk to the registration desk. There is a form to fill in to get an airport transfer. So On to tomorrow. We split up tomorrow in the morning into different meetings. SGCI coordinators are expected to attend the PERCA meeting, which starts at 9 o'clock. What room is that going to be in? Here? Okay. The Council's committee will start in the boardroom number 1 at 9:30 for those involved in the Council's committee meeting. And then myself and others from the CTAs, we have a CTA meeting starting at 9:30 in Ruvu, and Ruvu's just next door here, opposite the registration desk. So that is the morning. We'll split up into our respective meetings. We will come back together at lunch tomorrow at 12:30 until 1:30, and then after lunch there is a gender and inclusivity session here to which everybody is invited. If you haven't, the final announcement I have is if you haven't filled the registration form for today, please fill the registration. You need to sign to say that you have attended today. Please see the registration desk to fill it in. So with that, unless I have forgotten anything, Ruth, Pulang, no? Okay, please go for a break. There should be tea and coffee and water, etc. outside. And then SGCs, please come back into this room within the next 5-10 minutes. Thank you.